Kenya has made significant progress in increasing access to family planning services in recent years, especially in underserved communities.
Apparently not enough progress, because by the imperial decree of the world's most powerful doctor, who is able to decide medical policy for entire countries despite the small matter of not having any medical qualification whatsoever, Kenya is about to become an open-air laboratory hosting the world's largest contraceptive experiment. The contraceptive drug at the center of this experiment is called DMPASC, which stands for Depo-Medroxyprogesterone Subcutaneous, but you might know it by the brand name Depo-Provera, marketed by Pfizer. Depo-Provera is an easy-to-use contraceptive shot that regulates hormones in such a way as to prevent conception, which sounds great, and unfortunately that's where all the good news ends. Now, the bad news about Depo-Provera is that it is such a dangerous medication that in the US where it's made, it is required to come with a black box warning stating that it makes your bones lose their mineral density, and if you use it regularly during adolescence or early adulthood, you're probably going to have a bunch of fractures as you get older, because your bones will be weak and brittle. The warning also mentions that you should not use it as a birth control method for longer than 2 years, unless you absolutely have no other choice. Why? Because as these Ethiopian Jewish women found out in Israel, where they were given Depo-Provera jabs for years without their knowledge, it causes long-term fertility issues, which is a fancy way of saying it sterilizes you. And that's not even the really bad news. What if I told you that this drug is now known to cause as much as a 6-fold increase in the risk of developing brain cancer, breast cancer, and spinal cancer? What if I told you that Pfizer has faced multiple class action lawsuits worth over $700 million at last count from women who took Depo-Provera and subsequently developed brain tumors, breast cancer, and spinal tumors? What if I told you that to date, Pfizer has paid out close to $3 million in settlements to these women, and that the number of new Depo-Provera lawsuits keeps growing almost on a daily basis? Then you might wonder, why is Emperor William Gates deploying his economic machine to push this dangerous and defective drug on underprivileged women across Africa and the global south? The reason is because they are not expected to know better. All of this information I've just mentioned is not disclosed to African women, to whom it's marketed as a straightforward birth control solution with no major downside. While Depo-Provera is required to come with a black box warning in the US, it is not subject to any such requirements in Africa. So all that these ladies in Kenya will get is a jab from a healthcare professional who will assure them that all is well. They will not realize that to Bill Gates and his collaborators from the American Imperial Corps, African women are viewed not as humans with adult body sovereignty, but as test subjects without rights. This cavalier disregard for the notion of African body sovereignty is consistent with the behavior of a racialized empire in the global north. I already mentioned the Israeli government's sterilization of thousands of Ethiopian Jews using Depo-Provera without their knowledge. Just a couple of years before that was exposed, it also emerged that Depo-Provera was administered to thousands of women in Navrongo, northern Ghana, without their knowledge or informed consent. It will probably not surprise you to know who was behind this experiment.
My name is Yabo Sumtre. I have a master's degree in public health from Columbia University, and I work for Columbia University on a project in Ghana called MOTEC. The MOTEC project is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. My supervisor, Dr. Jim Phillips, repeatedly asked me to omit and conceal information about Gates, Grameen, and Columbia University for my research newsletter. He asked me to minimize and bury the significant Gates, Columbia, and Grameen partnership information in the back of our research newsletter, or else I would be fired.
A few years before that, Pfizer, them again, had conducted an illegal drug trial on 200 Nigerian children in Kano, northern Nigeria, to test the experimental drug Trovan. 11 of the children ended up dying, and dozens more ended up with permanent, life-altering injuries as a result of Trovan. The US government promptly jumped in to apply diplomatic pressure to get the award settlement negotiated down from $2 billion to just $75 million. And by the way, in the course of the negotiations, Pfizer retained a lobbyist in Nigeria who famously said the quiet part out loud. The worth of the life of a child born and bred in Kano cannot be compared to that of a child born and bred in the United States. Yes, he actually said that. What makes this picture even worse for the Pfizer-Gates team-up is that while the Gates Foundation's interest in African birth control is presented as something born out of an interest in lifting rural African women out of poverty, the same Gates Foundation funds Power Shift Africa, a Nairobi-based climate NGO that regularly publishes reports attacking African high-energy projects and criticizing the African Development Bank for funding energy projects that harness the continent's vast fossil fuel energy reserves. In other words, in the world of Mr. William Gates, Africans gaining access to cheap electricity and industrialization using their own cheap energy reserves is bad for the environment and should be fought against, regardless of however much wealth it would create for Africans. Yet he apparently wants to lift Africans out of poverty. So what's his solution? Apparently, it's a campaign promoting a contraceptive drug in an overpopulated country whose population density is roughly 6 times less than that of the Netherlands, which is not overpopulated. A contraceptive drug that makes your bones brittle, makes you permanently infertile, gives you about 3 different types of cancer, and is also in the process of getting sued out of existence. Bill Gates, ladies and gentlemen.